Welcome to another edition of our treatment of the International Sunday School lesson. Today's lesson is entitled Jacob's Deception, and it's taken from Genesis the 27th chapter, verses 5 through 10, verses 18 through 19, and verses 21 through 29. And it's for September the 11th, 2018, the fall quarter, lesson number 11. Now, a little background information and a real quick review. We note that this is about Jacob and Esau and Rebekah and Isaac, and how that Jacob and Esau were twins, and Esau was the favored son of Isaac, and Jacob was the favored son of Rebekah. And as this story goes on, Jacob had already gotten the birthright he had talked his brother out of the firstborn, the right of the firstborn, and had got that out of his brother. And also, too, there had been a lot of contention between Jacob and Esau, as they were very different types of people. And as this story takes place, and as we get into this story, this is the time of right before Isaac's death. And he has gotten up older. These men are now in their 40s, and their daddy was well advanced in age. And that's where we take our story up at. And Genesis 27, 5 through 7. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, and Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food, that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now, Jacob, knowing that his time was at hand and that he wouldn't be around much longer, he wanted to bestow a blessing on his favorite son Esau. And so he had told Esau, who caught such great game and prepared food the way that he liked it prepared, that Isaac liked it prepared, he had told his son Esau, go out to the field and hunt and find some wild game and kill it, and you fix it and you bring it back, and I'll give you my first blessing. Because see, a patriarch back in the day, a patriarch, their blessings meant something. If you'll remember back from your reading in the Bible, how that Jacob, in his old age, when he is blessing the sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, how that where he put his right hand had significance when he was blessing them, because he put his hands on those boys at the same time, and he crossed over and put his right hand on the youngest ones and his left hand on the oldest ones, and that had significance. Because like I said, in this day and time when the patriarchs would bestow a blessing on a child, it had a lot of significance. And so Isaac had said that he wanted to give that blessing to Esau because he had already seen how Esau had gotten finagled out of his inheritance, his right of the firstborn. His brother had talked him out of it. So Isaac wanted to make sure that he bestowed that blessing on to Esau because Esau was his favorite son. Now we see here that Rebekah was snooping around and heard what Isaac and Esau were talking about. And she, because Jacob was her favorite son, she began to formulate this plan of how that Jacob would be able to con his daddy, who was pretty much blind. He would be able to con his daddy into giving him and praying that blessing over him. Okay? Now continuing on, Genesis 27, 8 through 10. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare for them delicious food for your father, such as he loves. And you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies. Now, this plan is complete deception. It is perpetrating a lie to Isaac. It's going around, it's showing a lack of faith in God because she is using deception to get what she wanted instead of depending on God to deliver things, good things for her son Jacob. And you will sometimes see people do this kind of thing and throughout their Christian walk, where they will not have faith in God to make a way, and so they'll cut a corner, they will deceive somebody, they will go back on a bill that they owe, they will do something wrong, something immoral to force things a certain way. And that always comes from a lack of faith. Now, Rebekah at this point is demonstrating a lack of faith. She has concocted this plan in her own mind, has decided to deceive her husband, to involve her son in that deception, and take all of the consequences that deception is going to have. Now, it was in God's plan. It was in God's infinite plan to bless both of those boys, to just shower blessings on both of them. But because because Isaac and Rebekah had picked favorites, and because Rebekah at this point has got a very deceiving heart to where she wants to force things a certain way, and she doesn't have faith and confidence in God to do what he had promised to do, and she tries to force it that way, and willing to lie and cheat and perpetrate a fraud. And not only that, but to involve her own son in that fraud. And the person who is being defrauded is also her son. There is sin all through this plan. Now, God still, regardless of their failings and their shortcomings, God still wants to bless these people. But there are consequences for what happens here. This is a turning point in this family's life, and they are consequences, and those consequences go on for generations. Now, it does not mean that God holds those other generations accountable for that sin. It's just that the natural consequences of people's bad actions, their children and their grandchildren oftentimes reap the consequences for their actions. For example, if your daddy was a drunk, you're not going to be held accountable for his sins. But by the fact that he was an alcoholic and stayed drunk all the time and didn't work, that is consequences that have come to play and come to bear in your life. Okay? So, Rebecca tells her son, that's her favorite, to go out and get the goats. She'll prepare it. And then poor old Isaac, he's blind. And they'll go in and just run this scam on him. Okay? Now, continuing on, 27:18 through 19. So he went into his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" And Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now set up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." So we see here how that Rebecca had talked to Jacob. She had talked him into going out and doing this. They had dressed Jacob up so that he would be able to con his daddy. He probably, as best as he could, he tried to sound like his brother Esau. He has bought into the plan. His mama's deceptive plan. His mama told him to go in there and pretend to be his brother, and that is exactly what Jacob did. And Rebecca has actively participated in this because she has killed those goats and fixed them to where it looks like, tastes like, feels like the game of the field. And they have tried to give Jacob the smell of the field so they can perpetrate this deception on Isaac. And here they are. Jacob is there. He's lying to his daddy. Okay? Now, 27:20 through 21. But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" And he answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether or not you are really my son Esau or not." Now, we see here how that Jacob was fully bought in to this plan. He not only was so bought into this plan, but he used the name of God to help in his deception. He said, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." He was invoking the name of God in this deception. It's like somebody goes out, you send your kid to the grocery store, and they go out and they shoplift, and they come back, and you say, "Well, how did we be able to buy all of this candy?" And the kid tells you, "Well, because the Lord let them just have it all on sale." That's the same kind of deal we're talking about here, where Jacob was invoking the name of God to help try to cover his deception. Isaac still wasn't fully buying into it. Notice he said, "Come near, my son. Let me see if you're really Esau or not." Because you remember, even back from their very first, when they were very first born, Esau was hairier than Jacob. Okay? Now, 22 through 26. Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, who felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He answered, "I am." Then he said, "Bring it near to me, that I may eat of my son's game and bless you." So he brought it near him, and he ate. And he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Esau said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son." So we see here how that Isaac, even though his eyesight was completely gone, he had good hearing. He had good smell, a good sense of smell. And he had good tactile sensations in his hands. And Jacob had doctored his hands up to make it feel like he was a lot hairier than he was. So when Isaac felt, it felt hairy. So he said, "Well, this must be Esau." And then he eats, he drinks, and he says, "Come near and kiss me, my son." Now let's continue on. 27 through 29. So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's son bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." Okay. Now, we see where Isaac still suspected something. And the reason why he had Jacob get near to him so he could kiss him, because he wanted to smell to see if this person smelled like he had been out in the field. He had the smell of the woods on him. And Jacob had went through steps to try to give himself that smell. So his daddy, at this point, finally gave in and believed the lie that he was his brother Esau. And if you'll notice here, one of the most important thing about this blessing is that thing that says, let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's son bow down to you. So, that is the important part of that blessing. It is the patriarch's designation of who was going to be the alpha male, the number one person making decisions for the overall clan. It was a step of actually designating who was really the one who's going to be in charge when the patriarch passed away. And that is the main reason why they went through all those steps and all of that deception and took such a huge chance by doing this. Because if Isaac had actually discovered the deceit in the middle of this, instead of pronouncing a blessing on this person that they wanted him to think was Esau, instead of pronouncing a blessing, Isaac could have pronounced a curse at that moment. So they took a huge chance to go through with this deception. Okay. Well, it was a done deal. It happened. Okay, now, some concluding thoughts. Let's talk a little bit about the consequences of this deception. Now, there are consequences when we are deceptive and don't have faith. And these people, these two characters in this story, Jacob and his mama Rebecca, had consequences. Now, it was God's intention that Jacob was going to be the number one. He was the one that God had already decided that Jesus was going to come through his line. He was the one that was going to be produce the children of Israel, and that all of these great prophets were going to be his descendants, and they were going to build the temples, and they were going to do all these great things and have all these blessings. God had already decided that. But Rebekah and Jacob did not have faith. And they ran a scam on Isaac. And the consequences were severe. For one thing, Jacob and Rebekah, mother and son, loved each other. Jacob was her favorite child. Right after this event. Jacob had to leave, and he never saw his mama again. All of the brotherly support and love that could have been through Esau and Jacob never happened. They were almost always in a point of contention. Jacob had to go off and sojourn by himself. Couldn't be around any of his near kin. He was up there with his mama's people, and they did him wrong. He ended up getting conned himself a couple of times up there when he was with his mama's people. And he got paid back for this deception. Rebekah had her favorite son that she never saw again, died without ever seeing him again. So there were consequences. There are always consequences when you do wrong. You cannot do wrong and get by. And something else too is, even though they did the wrong thing, God's plan still happened. God can take some of our biggest mistakes and let things happen as exactly like they were, like He intended for them to happen. Well, friends, we'll be with you again next weekend, good Lord willing.